How to shade fabric folds with pencil. This is the cylindrical fold, the cone fold, and this is called the diaper fold because if you imagine a baby's diaper being pinned on one side and pinned on the other side and kind of draping in the middle. So I'm going to just show you real quick the cone fold. Just going to real quick draw the shapes. Just copying from the picture. Again, don't worry that much if you mess up because you can always erase. People make mistakes. That's why pencils have erasers. Just draw lightly and it'll be easy to fix. And remember, these ones are just for practice. Okay, so now that we have the outline drawn, we're going to start with the shading. Now the idea is you follow the form. You imagine that you are drawing on an actual three-dimensional fold, not on a flat surface. So what I'm doing is I am lifting up my pencil as I draw so that every line I draw starts to fade off as it goes away from where I started. So that way I create a sense of volume and I create a darker area here and a lighter area here because I'm lifting my pencil up as I go. So the line, instead of being a solid line, tapers off at the end. So the pencil I'm using is your typical HB pencil. It's the same pencil you use when you take a standardized test, yellow Ticonderoga pencil, and you can see it says HB on it. So this is actually a very high quality pencil. Don't let the fact that it's not an artist pencil fool you. So I'm just looking at the folds in the picture and I'm basically copying what I see. If it's a lighter area, I leave it alone. If it's a darker area, I shade it. Now, what I'm doing, this type of line, is called hatching, which is just making a bunch of lines next to each other. I'm not actually pressing very hard. What I'm doing is I'm building up layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called cross hatching, which means that I went from the left to the right and now I'm going top to bottom. So I'm going to do more cross hatching towards the edge of the fold and less cross hatching towards the highlight area. And I just keep doing that. I'm not actually pressing very hard and I'm not blending anything. I'm just following the three-dimensional form. Because I'm repeating the same task of cross-hatching and pressing down and lifting up with a pencil and following the three-dimensional form, I've sped up this little section because I'm basically repeating the same instructions. So in the interest of brevity, what you're seeing is double the speed just in this one little section so I can get through it and get to the next part. I'm just basically looking at the picture that I'm copying from and figuring out where all the darkest parts are and putting in a light layer of cross-hatched shadows. Next, I'm going to take the 6B pencil, which is a very, very, very dark pencil, and I'm going to fill in the darkest areas. So where do I see the darkest shadows? Here. You see how that makes it pop? A little bit here, but not as much. Here. Here. You got to be very careful with the 6B pencil. It makes a very dark mark. So in between the yellow pencil and the 6B pencil is the 2B pencil. So the 2B pencil is a little bit lighter than the 6B, but it's darker than the yellow pencil. So if I draw this in here, and then I use a lighter pencil here, and then the lightest pencil would be the 4H pencil. H, you think about the harder the lead, the harder the graphite, the fewer pieces. If it's hard, the fewer pieces come off of it. So if it's really hard graphite, that means that very few little pieces of graphite are coming off, and it makes a very light mark. So when it comes to the letter H, the higher the number, the lighter the color. Whereas with the 6B, you can think of B as standing for black, and the higher the number, the darker the color. So I'm going to add in some lighter colors here with the 4H pencil, and it's going to make the lightest mark. Giving me a mid-tone. Without that mid-tone, the highlights and shadows would have nothing connecting them. And again, I have to be very intentional about the direction of my line. Okay, so the next step is using the blending stump. Now, the blending stump is not a pencil at all. It's just wound very tightly paper into a point. And you don't want to draw with just the point. You want to draw a little bit at an angle, so you're getting the side of the blending stump. And it's very, very important that you don't just scribble scrabble in a random direction, but you follow the three-dimensional form of the fabric as if you're drawing on real fabric. So that you see how I'm curving my line, and I'm going not back and forth, but from darkest to lightest. So when I get to the lightest area, I pick it up and go back to the darkest area. And by doing that, I'm picking up the darker tone, darker value, and bringing it into the lighter area. So it's going to keep it going from dark to light. I don't want to go back and forth. I want to go in one direction and then lift it up. Now, because I'm going to use a cross-hatching motion, I also am going to go up and down. So I start at the top of the cone and go down. And that also gives it a three-dimensional look. Now, the other thing is, this is super important, is that you don't want to just do it across the whole thing because it'll just look like a smeared mess. So you have to keep your shading within each area, bound by the lines you drew. So all my blending is being done just in this area. Now I'm going to do this area. And now this area. Now, at this point, it kind of looks a little bit messed up because you've lost the highlights. So we're going to get them back. So don't worry about that. I'm now going to take my 6B pencil, and I'm not going to outline the whole thing. I'm merely going to pop the darkest areas again because I lost a lot of that dark tone when I blended. So I'm going to go in here. If it doesn't look really dark, I'm not using it. So I'm only very surgically using it in certain areas and not in others. Now my next step is, again, a little bit of blending. A little bit of blending. Starting to get that three-dimensional look that I so want. And now I'm actually going to use this little eraser. You could use any eraser really, as long as it is a nice fine edge. And you're going to start pulling out the highlights. And then if it looks a little too harsh, I'm going to use the 4H pencil because it's a real light pencil. And I'm going to just soften that edge a little bit. You might want to outline parts of it with a 4H pencil so you get that clean line, but it doesn't look like this dark shadow. What you don't want to do is you don't want to take the 6B and trace around the outside edge of everything, because that will make it look like a flat coloring book picture, and that's what we don't want. So I was very careful as to where I chose to put the 6B pencil, and very intentional about highlights, midtones, and shadows. That would be how you would do the cone fold. And then the next one would be the cylindrical fold. That's this one. And so if you think about it like a hanging curtain would have a cylindrical fold, because it's reminiscent of a cylinder. So it's actually a simpler fold to do than the cone fold. Because if you look at this cylinder, you can see it gets darker around the edges, and there's a highlight at the top. And it has that sense of volume, and you could see the lines on it are curved. They can't be straight because when you draw on a round shape, the line you draw has to be round. Okay, if you think of it that way, drawing the cylindrical one will be no problem for you. Again, you follow the forms. And then when you've mastered that, you do the diaper fold. And when you're all done with that, then your next step would be to go ahead and try and draw this fancy dress. Now, I suggest that you try drawing the dress by copying a picture of it first, and then you try drawing it from real life. Drawing it from real life can be a little bit intimidating, but drawing it from a picture will be a little bit more simple. So what I'm doing is I'm just drawing the outer shape first, and then I'm going to come back in and add in all the folds, and then I'm going to do the shading. So if you think of it as like an hourglass figure, or if you've ever had a plastic bottle of dish soap, check these out. They almost look like a dress form, like a mannequin form in a department store. Very often dish soap containers are based on the woman's hourglass figure. A lot of pottery is based on a female form as well. So if you just think of the simple curves that make up a female body, and then you can add the folds in as details around it, it'll be a lot easier than if you just try and draw it thinking about just the details. It's a lot easier if you think about the outer form first and then add the details later. So it's going to be a challenge, but definitely do it from a photograph first, and then from the actual live dress, because that'll be the real challenge. But by the time you get to the dress, by the end of the week, you'll be 100% prepared, and it'll be easier than you think it'll be. I'm not going to finish this because I think you get the idea, and happy drawing.